Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you happen to be. I've been watching the general chat, and quite a diverse group that we have from all over the world right now. My name is Carl Soule, and joining us this morning is Ryan Morrison, who is the co-writer and editor of the Netflix film Stowaway. Good morning, Ryan. Good to see you.
How's it going, Carl? Good to see you again.
Awesome. I just thought we would kind of jump in and dive in the 30 minutes we have here. To start with, I want you to introduce yourself just a little bit, in particular, your background on how you got into feature filmmaking.
Sure. The standard old story of starting out on YouTube and making your way into the world of feature films. I came up with one of my best friends, Joe Penna, who's the director of Stowaway, and I was working on the editorial and visual effects for our YouTube channel called Mystery Guitar Man. And if you're familiar with it, or if you go and check it out, it is totally different than the kinds of content that we make for feature films. But yeah, got my start out there, and then had a good career on YouTube. And as YouTube started to evolve and we started to evolve as creators, we wanted to start telling bigger stories, worked our way into making short films, and then from the short films got some opportunities to make features. And now we've got one on Netflix, which I'm very excited about.
Awesome. Now, your first big feature film was a film called Arctic with starring Mads Mikkelsen.
Mm-hmm.
What did Arctic prepare you for in the making of Stowaway?
Oh yeah. Well, it definitely gave me a real appreciation for needing an assistant editor because I didn't have one on Arctic. And coming from YouTube, Joe and I were so familiar with just kind of doing everything ourselves that jumping into feature films, something of that scale, you got to let go a little bit and allow others to join in. And it ended up being a really big learning experience. I definitely learned about organization. I learned a lot about organization when you're working at that scale, and learned about trying to stay warm in a in a metal shipping container while I was out in the middle of Iceland editing as we went, because Joe and I have an unusual workflow where I'm kind of laying the railroad track down as the train is moving. I'm cutting the movie together literally as cards are coming from the camera.
Wow. And that's kind of developed sort of a signature style of production that you guys carried directly into Stowaway.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing.
Yeah, we were really fortunate to work with a very cool company in Germany when we were shooting Stowaway that basically allowed us to have our script supervisor taking their notes on an iPad as opposed to a notepad, and that work is kind of redundant. So it's redundantly done by our assistant editor. So what we did was we worked out a situation where the information, that metadata, was getting sent, all the notes from the script supervisor was getting sent automatically to Premiere. And my assistant editor didn't need to log shot names and take numbers and all that stuff. And syncing was a snap. So it really just made it so that information was coming right from the set, whether it be metadata or the actual cards with the footage on it. And my assistant editor took 1 click, 2 clicks to get everything logged and synced with sound. And we were ready to start just thinking about creative rather than worrying about organization and data entry.
Wow, that's amazing. And I got to say, the technique that you have, the quality that you ended up producing with this film, as I've been watching this with friends, people are comparing it to The Martian. They're comparing it to Gravity. You and I have never discussed like the budget of Stowaway. I don't think those numbers have ever been public in any way, shape, or form. But I got to say, I'm kind of making an educated guess here that it's probably a little bit less than some of the films like Gravity that were out there. You want to talk a little bit about how you were able to achieve that? I know that you dove pretty deep into previs and actually did a lot of pre-visualization on this film before you even laid down a single frame of film or video.
Sure. Yeah. No, we definitely didn't have the budget that Gravity or The Martian had. We probably spent what they spend on food. But yeah. So I mean, and most of that comes from most of our opportunity to even be able to make a movie that looked more expensive than it was came from the preparation that my director Joe Penna put into the film, and a lot of that came from previs. The most pre-visualization, the most expensive parts of the movie were all going to be the big heavy visual effects sequences, and especially when you're making a space movie, of course, you're going to have some heavy-duty visual effects sequences. So we went into it with a very specific plan. We sat down and we worked with Unity to basically create a virtual camera that's kind of like playing a video game. And we had our VFX team had worked up some very rudimentary models and animations that would be the actors acting out a sequence. Sometimes it would be something like the launch that's at the very beginning of the film, where the actors aren't moving; they're sitting still in a cockpit. So Joe got to literally physically walk around with the camera. Him and our cinematographer got to walk around with a virtual camera shooting these CG models, and they would go out and get whatever crazy shots they felt like they could actually pull off. And then I had all of the coverage in the world, and we didn't have to worry about leaving our actors sitting in the same spot for 10 hours a day for 3 weeks. And I got to sit and cut together the sequence with them. So now if you were to watch the film side by side with the previs, they're almost identical. Because Joe had essentially gone and shot the scene before we actually went out there and shot it in the cockpit. And it saved us a ton of money, a ton of time. We got to see, oh, these are problems that we're gonna run into on set, because we had taped out how big the actual set was. So Joe could say, you know what, even though I want this shot, we're not going to be able to get it. Or they actually made a choice of camera for that particular sequence. We shot most of the movie on an Alexa Mini with the expectation of using the resolution from that sensor. But for this sequence, the cockpit was so small that we needed to shoot on a larger sensor so that we could essentially shoot wider and then punch in. And because we physically couldn't get the camera in if we had a bigger camera.
Wow.
So yeah, using pre-visualization allowed us to have a lot of freedom. It made choices for cinematography. It made choices for editorial. It immediately had us determine the budget for the visual effects. And that allowed us to know, okay, we can cut this shot or we can add this shot, but it's going to cost us or gain us this amount of money. And it helped Joe and I make some informed decisions on where the budget went.
Wow. Normally you think about pre-visualization, and I think for most people, like, the big, like the Avengers movies and stuff like that, you really try and think of, you don't think of previs as an independent filmmaking tool, but you guys used it to great effect. One criticism I've heard about using previs is it can lock in the movie so much that you don't have the flexibility to kind of adapt to what the actors actually end up doing on scene or on set. But you didn't have that problem, did you?
No, we were really fortunate. And I think a lot of that comes down to the director, the actors, and how much trust the producers will give you. Because also when you decide to start making changes on something, the most important part, at least to the producers, of having the pre-visualization is that's our roadmap and that's our budget is locked. When you start adding more shots, then the question becomes, okay, how much are each of these going to cost? Right. And when you're on a shoestring budget like we have been historically, adding shots is a scary decision to make. However, Joe was very prepared, and when we were shooting it, I was literally cutting in what we were shooting as we were shooting it. So we could see the sequence play out, and we could feel the rhythm of the sequence. And we didn't skip a beat because it would go from a shot of live action to a shot of pre-visualization. And I had already kind of filled out the pre-visualization with sound design, with music, so that we kind of had a general feel for it. And that did allow us to capture magic whenever it was out there to be captured. And with folks like Anna Kendrick and Daniel Day Kim out in a spacesuit on wires, sometimes there was just something that was interesting that Joe and I hadn't planned for, and we were allowed to throw that into the cut, see how it worked, and say, oh, you know what, that actually saved us 2 shots. It was a tremendously powerful tool.
And just to set the stage, while you were shooting the film, why don't you describe a little bit about kind of the setup that you had there with having the edit bay literally like right next door to the soundstage that you were shooting?
Yeah, I mean, it's the only way that Joe and I know how to do it, but it seems like most of the other more experienced crew and cast that we had, they were really happy to see a workflow that allowed them to kind of see the something pretty close to the finished product so quickly. I mean, at first, Joe and I were shooting in Munich, and my editorial bay was maybe 4 or 5 steps across a hallway, however wide a hallway is, to the set. And because of the technology that I had mentioned earlier about where our script supervisor was essentially doing most of what the assistant editor's job would be on the day, we didn't really have to worry too much about data management. As soon as the a card was full, it would go to our DIT. He would make a copy of it, and then my assistant editor would automatically have everything. All of our footage would be right there, ready to go, and I was able to be cutting together scenes and sequences while they were still being shot in the other room, and that allowed us to be able to say, the scene works, the scene doesn't work, and even from a larger, more global approach, I was able to see some relationships that were really popping on screen. I could see that Daniel and Anna had great chemistry. And because I'm the co-writer of the film, I went to my friend and partner, the director, Joe Penna, and I said, hey, these two are really working. I think we should add another scene that just kind of lets them play off of each other, because I'm having a lot of fun watching them, and I feel like the audience will. And I wrote a scene at lunch. The actors graciously learned their lines very quickly. They shot it right after lunch, and it was in the movie, and now it's still in the cut on Netflix right now, and it all happened in less than 8 hours. And that wouldn't have been possible if we didn't have the budget and time to go back and do reshoots. I couldn't cut the movie in LA and then say, yeah, you know what, Anna and Daniel are really popping here. Let's go back and do some more reshoots. We didn't have that chance. So this gave us the opportunity to do that. And then also from a more producerial standpoint, making some casting decisions, it allows us to say, yeah, confidently, we can if you have another movie that you have to shoot in 3 months, we can shoot you out in 3 weeks, because we know that we're going to be able to get it done, and I can prioritize looking at scenes and cutting together scenes that have one particular actor in them, and say, okay, we've got it. We're not worried about losing that actor now, and we can send them to their next job.
There's so many ways. You and I have done these presentations before, and every time you and I talk, I always start thinking about how much money that you're saving compared to like the typical way of doing things. I've
Yeah.
been on many a film where, the editor is waiting for the reshoots to happen. Things get delayed in scheduling. And, again, it just pushes back the release date of the film, or you have to make creative compromises. But you guys have really stumbled onto a kind of a new way of working that I think is in a lot of respects, it's kind of the future of filmmaking. And it was perfect for COVID. It was perfect for the whole situation that you dealt with COVID. There's a number of other films that I've done some consulting on, and a lot of them were significantly delayed due to COVID because they were waiting for reshoots. They were waiting to get the band back together, so to speak.
Yeah.
And you guys avoided all of that.
Yeah, I mean, Joe and I kind of joke that we could have made either of our first two features during COVID, because shooting with one or two actors out in the middle of nowhere in Iceland, totally possible right now. And then especially Stowaway, we shot entirely on a stage because we couldn't afford to go to space. Yeah, I mean, both of those worked out really well. And kind of going back to the point that I was just making about our workflow, and this kind of ties into to COVID as well, is that I also am not of the school of thought that a picture must be locked before sound design, music, those kinds of things are considered. So I want to involve those departments as early as possible. I have the sound designer. On Stowaway, I had the sound designer working on scenes that I was just temping up sound on scenes that I was cutting together literally as they were coming from the stage, and that is all remote. That's all something that can be done. I can send cuts, across, I can send them over the internet across the country or across the world very, very easily. And those departments, I feel like, influence the edit. I think every editor out there has watched a cut of a scene that they've put together and thought to themselves, oh, well, now that the music's there, I wish I could hang on that shot a little bit longer, or I want to cut on this beat here. But you don't know that until the music's in. And I don't think they need to be mutually exclusive concepts. And then in terms of COVID for the rest, I mean, during the shoot, we were essentially locked down anyway. We were just on a soundstage with 4 actors, and there was nowhere to really go. And then in the post-production process, I had already done most of the editorial on set, and then working from LA, my assistant was still in Germany, and we kind of had an opportunity because of the production's workflow that Adobe has to offer. We weren't stepping on each other. We still managed to have our projects were safe. So we had the opportunity to do that, and somebody was always working because of the time difference in between LA and Germany. Whenever I would wrap up for the day, my assistant would start up. And then whenever he was done for the day, I would be starting up. So the work was always being done. And I think I had heard just before we started, they were talking about kind of like a hybrid style of working. And I really do think that that's probably the best way moving forward. And that's what production is going to look like. Post-production is going to look like moving forward. Joe Penna, I'm fortunate enough to have my director. He lives down the street from me, and we're writing together every day anyway. So I get to have him in the room with me when I'm making decisions. However, with color, with sound design, with sound mixing, a lot of those things had to be done remotely. And producers checking out cuts, and actors taking a look at things, even doing ADR. All of that had to be done remotely. So I do think that there is a hybrid of both in-person and remote workflows that we'll be seeing in the future.
Nice. And even due to COVID, I don't think you ever had to deal with any particular scene where, you had to like insert a slide that said, this scene goes here for like a producer review or anything else. It's always about trying to get, I hear this a lot nowadays, is no matter when you screen the film, even in the very early days, it's all about getting it as close to final as
Yeah.
possible. And we have the tools to do that now, even if it's simple or leaving a previs shot in the sequence. We have the tools to do that now. So, thinking about the old days of, inserting like title cards that cut people out of the flow of the film, that's all a thing of the past these days.
Yeah.
You talked a little bit about productions. This is a new feature in Premiere Pro that we introduced a couple of years ago, and it's specifically designed around narrative filmmaking. And it allows for a bunch of Premiere projects to kind of get tied together in a special way, so you can organize media in one place, and then your edits can be in different places, and different editors can be working on different parts. I know you worked with a very early version of that. You want to talk just briefly about that?
Yeah, I mean, it was a game changer for me because I was so used to this crazy workaround workflow so that myself and my assistant or whoever else was working on a project at any given time, you have to. It's always such a dicey move because when you're working with more than one person, because you're wondering, okay, well, did I make a change here, or did they make a change, and did my change get overwritten? And the way that productions works is that it locks a project when a user has it open. And that still worked regardless of whether we were sitting across from each other, whether we were sitting across the world from each other. We did lots of tests where it was like, okay, lock it, unlock it, from while we're on Skype or FaceTime, and being able to see in real time the protection work. And then in addition to that, it just helped with organization because you keep all of your media. We had a dailies project where we just keep all of our media there. And that one was our big one that, it saves us quite a bit of time when opening other projects, because sometimes these projects get really inflated. And then it just keeps it organized, so I can see where everything is. I can open a project that's just sound design. I can open a project that's just music and drag those elements onto whatever timeline I'm using, and I'm not bogging down my machine with having multiple projects that all have redundant media in them. My computer only has to think about the material once. Rather than having to have duplicate, and then everybody's had that, wait a minute, I have the sound effect that is now disconnected, but I still have it on the drive and it's connected in this project. You don't have that anymore because it's just referencing one thing. So it just made my life significantly easier, and it allowed us to do it in a safe way too.
Awesome. We do have a couple of questions that have come into the Q&A pod. The first one's from Jason Katzoff. How much of the set was physical versus virtual? I know the ship was mostly a practical set.
We built that baby. We built a spaceship. Marco, our production designer, did an outstanding job. I thought I was going to cry when I walked onto this thing because I was like, I'm on a spaceship. And Joe Penna, our director, made sure that we closed everything up, so we didn't have flyaway walls. When our actors were in there, they were on a spaceship. And to our camera department's credit, you have to walk through those little tunnels, and there are a lot of tracking shots that, man, I don't know how I saw them do it, and I still don't really totally understand. But yeah, the set was practical, and I'd say probably like maybe 80% of the exterior set stuff for when we're outside. That's all practical as well. We built that stuff so that the actors could climb up something. They could be standing on something. It wasn't like they were just standing on a green box. That stuff was real. Wow.
How did you handle lighting? I'm just curious.
Miserable. We had, because the concept is, and there's a lot of armchair scientists that say that we didn't quite get the gravity right, and I'll forward them over to all of the NASA engineers that gave us the plans for what they hope to be doing. But yeah, we have the whole way that gravity works is through rotation, kind of like if you were rotating a bucket of water and how the water stays up in the bucket. So there was a constant discussion about where the sun would be at any given time. So that was really, really, really challenging. And I'm very glad that my VFX department and my camera department and Joe, our director, had a very clear idea as to where the sun would be at any given time, because I did not.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, we got one more question here from Laura Tabor. I hope I'm getting your last name right, Laura. I think we partially answered this already. What type of cameras did you use, and what were the challenges? You talked a bit about the Alexa, the Alexa Mini as the primary camera. You had you did use another camera, or was it just strictly the Alexa?
Yeah, we used a Red Monstro for the opening scene, purely because we physically didn't have the room to be able to be swinging lenses, because the camera operator was literally right next to our actors, and they because we built everything so practically, we wanted it to be as real as possible. If you watch some of those takeoff videos of the actual astronauts heading to the ISS, it's even smaller. So yeah, we tried to be as real as possible, and the only way to do that was to be able to get maybe two shots out of one would be to have a bigger sensor, and then we just tried to do our best to match it in color, which thankfully we did.
It looked great.
Yeah.
As far as finishing the film, I know COVID presented some specific challenges around color. You want to talk about that a little bit, about how because color is one of those really kind of, I want to say, intimate type of things that people are used to going into a studio, and they're used to sitting on a couch, watching the big display, and kind of giving notes to somebody sitting behind a big console. Tell us a little bit about what your experience was like, having to deal with COVID and having all that shut down.
For sure. Yeah, color is it's a really difficult department to do during COVID, because even outside of color, you're never sure what something's going to look, even outside of COVID, you're never sure what something's going to look like on a phone, on your TV, on your laptop. They're all going to look different. And when you're trying to calibrate and calculate and see what someone else is seeing, you really want to make sure that you're looking at the same thing. And most of the time that would, you would just want to sit in the same room and then both literally watch the same, look at the same screen. And we didn't have that opportunity. We couldn't go to Germany because COVID didn't allow for anyone to fly. We tried a couple of different solutions, and what we landed on was, there was a product called Streambox that we used in a color house in LA. So we were allowed to see a screen at an actual color house here in Los Angeles that was mirroring what we were seeing, what the guys were seeing in Germany, that our cinematographer and colorist were seeing there. But that also ended up being challenging, because is there loss through the stream on the internet? Is the projector calibrated the same way? So we did a combination of that and having exports sent to us on an iPad Pro, and we made sure that they had the exact same iPad Pro. As long as they looked the same, they were calibrated the same. That was the one thing that we could make sure was constant. And yeah, it was a very difficult process to lock down. But once we figured it out, it was very easy to communicate with our colorist and cinematographer. I feel like now that we've done it and got through all of the troubleshooting, we could do it again much easier. We wouldn't waste time through these fruitless
figuring
adventures.
It out.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. We've only got about 45 seconds left. I want to try and sneak one quick question in there from Ryan. What was the most difficult shot or scene you had to accomplish in the film?
There's a 3-minute one shot that is basically a whole tour of the ship. And I think the part that makes it the most difficult is our camera operator had to walk through the entire ship without banging into anything with a Ronin, and those ports are not very big. But he nailed it, and it only took us maybe 10 takes. But I think with all of his rehearsals, he was out in that set for maybe half a day, just practice before we even stepped on there with an actor. So yeah, that was really tough.
All right. Ryan, always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much for taking the time today. And with that, we're going to wrap up our session here, and we'll move into the next one. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Kyle.